No, we were talking about, what was the last thing we were talking about? And we'll start the tape going here.
going, I think.
It is going, okay. Well, we were also talking about the airlines a little bit
Sure.
after the war. And, so you decided to stay in and maybe would have stayed in the military longer, but then you were separated from the military because they downsized.
Yes,
And the question I'm thinking of right now, Hod, is you stayed in the Air Force Reserve until 1961, you said,
yes.
and then you and had the rank of a major. Okay, when Korea came along, what did you
Well, of
think?
course.
What did you
Well-
think would happen there?
Well, of course, Korea was long before 61.
Right.
And in Devil's Lake then, I met the mail carrier, and this would have been like 49 maybe, that I met the mail carrier who was an ex-GI, met him on the street and he saluted me, just for the hell of it. And I said, what was that all about? And he said, you'll see when you get home. And it was a letter to information on re-enlistment or whatever. That isn't just how it was put, but that he could see that it looked to me like I was being recalled to active duty, and but actually it was just information on it. But do you remember Ray Jordan?
Ray Jordan.
He was an instructor at
Oh,
Bel Air.
oh, yeah, definitely I do.
Yeah, okay. Well, see, that's where he got called back in.
Oh.
On the Korean. And he got called back in, that would have been in the winter of 49.
Okay.
Yeah, winter of 49. And so this is about the time that, the way material was recalled up to active duty material, yeah. But I wasn't recalled, so.
Okay.
If they would have recalled you, would you have had a choice in the matter? I mean,
Oh, no.
they were
No,
okay.
you reserve, you get called back in, you're called back in. Now, the thing about the reserve was so foolish. I was flying and instructing every day. That didn't count anything toward it. You had to go to some stupid meeting that meant nothing, to get credit in the reserve. And then June was the month that I had to go for 2 weeks out of the year for special training. Well, if you take 2 weeks in
Out of
June
spray
out of your
season.
spray season, you have
Killing
nothing
you.
left. So this is where I resigned my commission then.
I see.
So I have nothing coming from the reserve on a retirement program or anything like that.
Well, yeah, but if you stayed in the reserve up until 61, and you had to do your annual 2 weeks during June during all those years in the 50s?
I never did any, see,
Oh, you
so I
didn't?
didn't have what you call good years.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So otherwise, if I'd had good years,
Like making
20 years wouldn't do anything for you then. In the reserve, you had to stay till you were 60 years old in the reserve
Oh, I
to
see.
get
Oh.
anything there. That would only be active duty people that could retire at 50% after 20 years.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're back in Hayward, I guess, or you're back at your farm.
Yeah,
So, and that happened November '46.
yeah,
Did you go straight home?
yeah. And then I had planned to go back to school then at Eau Claire again.
And you were going to use the GI Bill, I presume.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my mother and dad had a car accident and my dad fractured his skull. So I ended up a farmer then. And that was, I never did go back then. And so it was in the summer of 1948 that your dad landed in the hayfield at my uncle's when we were putting up hay. And that's where I found out he had a flying school in Devil's Lake. And he said, why don't you come out and fly for me? And the term was until you hear something from the airlines. And
How
So-
do you know that you were in that situation, huh?
we discussed it.
Oh, what made him drop down on the field that day? Did
Oh, he came back to Stone Lake for a visit, and my uncle's field was only about 3 miles from your grandmother and grandfather's home.
Okay, did he land there because he wanted to talk to you and you guys were friends, or was
No,
it just
that was the closest good field for him to land in.
Yeah, yeah, but how did, because of the differences in your age,
Yeah,
how did he know that you were available? Yeah,
I
and a
told him.
pilot.
We discussed it, you know, an airplane flying service out in Devil's Lake, and I said I was out of the service as a pilot.
Oh,
Yeah.
so this was your first reunion really since you guys played baseball together, probably.
Exactly, yeah,
And then he got the history on you.
yeah,
And then one thing led to another and he made the offer.
yeah.
Oh,
And see, with me then, like I had what you called a multi-engine commercial license, but I didn't have a single-engine commercial license, if you can imagine, you know.
kind of crazy.
And he had the GI Bill then, so then I took 10 hours of dual on the GI Bill in small airplanes, and that's some of the best dual I ever took in my life, you know, because when you got the other background, and I had no light airplane background then, you know, my first light airplane background had went way back at Blythe, you know. And so this is where I have to say that I got my best training ever in light aircraft from your dad and Ray Jordan then on that program. And so then your flight instructor rating, that was on the GI Bill.
Right.
And then the flight instructor rating was the same way. The civilian, the CA or FAA, CA is what they called it then, and later FAA, didn't recognize any flight instruction that you did in the service. So then I had to go through the flight instruction program on the GI Bill.
To get your flight instructors ready.
Yeah. Which was great because, you know, again,
You're doing a light aircraft.
again, it was a lot of good training for me.
Yeah.
I can remember so much one time that on skis, early on skis, that I was flying with your dad. And he had a farm he wanted to land on skis to go in and see if he could collect a spray bill. And so I was flying the airplane, and of course in my day flying the airplane, you always landed early on the runway with the idea that if you had a problem, you could add power to go around. And of course, as I come in and I was landing like, you know, I've been a quarter of a mile away from the farmstead. And with the idea, you know, if I had trouble landing, I could add power to go around. And like your dad said, well, how come you're landing way here? And I explained why. Well, he said, I think that's a very good idea, but here, you know, we'll just continue flying up till we land right by the farm.
Because you guys have been walking in the snow
I
otherwise.
remember the first flight I took to pick up a passenger was, the road was blocked. I flew up to Garski and picked up one of the Garski boys and flew him to Devil's Lake. He was still in high school. And I remember that winter then, it was pretty much snowbound early. And I flew the mailman then out of Webster. And of course I landed by the school there at Webster then and loaded all the packages in around. I had to get him in first and load the packages all in and then fly the route. And that was kind of interesting.
Well, the one thing that's interesting is all the weather that you flew in.
Yeah,
I mean, the seasons that you flew in.
yeah. Well, see, that's where I got all my background in light aircraft. I was totally dumb. I remember at Hayward, when I got back, the guy at the airport took me for a ride in a Taylorcraft. My God, I thought that was just like flying on a piece of paper. You know?
Right, right.
And then I flew back to Hayward with well, my dad's brother died, and so Bert from Southam had a PA-12, and so I flew back with him to Hayward or to Stone Lake area to milk cows then while my dad was gone and helped my mother, you know, with the planing barn and everything that went with it. And do you know where the Green Lantern was at all? Nightclub down by the Sand Lake.
It sure sounds familiar, you know, we all remember, but wasn't that a common name, the Green Lantern, or was it just?
No, that's the
That
only
was
one I
wasn't
ever
that
remember.
Hayward?
That was
Oh.
by Stone Lake.
Oh, it was by Stone Lake?
Actually by Sand Lake, you know.
I
just
can't
east of
say
Stone Lake.
that I could locate that.
Well, you see, you know, when I got the word and flew down, I flew down in the middle of the night or late, you know, 11 o'clock or so I got in there. And I flew over where do you land? You're in skis, it's at night, you know. And the only thing to do is land out on the lake, on the skis somewhere. And of course, those were the days they were still cutting ice out of the lakes there. So you always had the chance of ice chunks cut out that were still there. And so I come in over the Green Lantern and let down, felt for the ground or for the snow and was sliding on the snow. And you know, when emptied the Green Lantern, then when they saw an airplane, we had position lights on that airplane. You didn't have any landing light, but position lights. And so when I, you know, the PA-12, you're familiar with the PA-12 with the double seat in back and the front?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I had my student in the front seat, you know, Burdette Burt, so I was in the back. So with the nose up there, after I landed, I tried to kick rudder, make it turn. It didn't come around, and I kicked the other rudder and didn't come around, and I said I can't get it to turn, and Burdette said you're standing still. You know, with a smooth landing on the snow in the dark at night, and I felt I was moving yet, see, but he said you're standing still. I'd come to a complete stop. So then of course I had power
Get it moving.
came around and parked by the lake shore for the night, and then somebody drove us to our farm. And the farm then would have been, you know, 2.5 miles from there.
So you're saying that, did I get it right, that from Dad's place, you mean your farm was really only, or was that a relative?
My uncle's farm.
Your uncle's farm
was,
3.5
yeah, it was
miles.
about 3 miles from there.
Okay.
And
then how
our
far
farm
away?
would have been more like 5.5 to 6 miles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that was really your backyard, that Stone Lake was very much your history.
Yeah, except I was in like what they called the Hayward School District.
I see.
So when I finished at Jordan School, then of course I went to Hayward.
Hayward.
So, you
Did
know,
Stone
back
Lake
in
have
those
its own
days, you
height?
didn't get around so much. I was, you know, not very well acquainted around Stone Lake.
But Stone Lake, did it have a school system that went up through high school?
Yeah, they did then.
Okay.
And then they dropped that to 2 years, and then they discontinued, and they went to Spooner from that district after
Oh,
that.
okay.
And so even though that I was like 5 to 6 miles from Stone Lake, I was about 9 miles from Hayward.
Mm-hmm.
And so then my folks were very much into me being in sports. And so this is where I got to room in town going to high school, so I be available to things.
That was pretty unusual though, wasn't it, for a parent to think that way?
It was, yeah.
I mean, let's face it.
My parents-
It was work first and athletics about 4 steps back.
Sure.
Wow, how would you explain that?
Yeah. Well, to me, you know, I not only helped me there a lot, but it helped me in my whole life, because most of the farm boys got drafted, went into the infantry and learned nothing, you know, for the future and that sort of thing. Where with me, in 1933, we had got a farm loan to get feed, to feed the cattle, to keep them alive. You couldn't raise, the drought and the depression were at the same time, so that everybody got clobbered, you know. But in our case, then we could work off our farm loan on the WBA crew.
Okay.
So when I was 11, then I drove horses all summer on the WBA crew working off the farm loan.
Well,
And my dad with the other team of horses did the farm work, you know, at home. So I would go down the road every morning with my team of horses and the wagon and.
Heck of
on the-
experience.
Yeah,
What,
and I thought I was the biggest wheel in the whole
I
township.
bet you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You used your own farm horses.
yes.
okay, let's continue on with that, because we're gonna cover all that ground eventually.
Right.
So then did you,
Yes, Dan.
no, I forgot, dang it.
Military.
Yeah, military. Oh, yeah, all right, your family. And we didn't cover this. You talked about your whole enlistment process, but the rest of the family at home, they were your mom and dad,
Yeah,
and
And
who else?
sister.
and my sister. My
Oh.
sister was born in 1919 at Christmas, so she was like 2.5 years older than I was.
Okay,
And our parents' other child, their first child, died, in about 3 months. So
Okay.
that was back in, about 1917.
okay, so your sister's name,
Was Elizabeth Drabeck,
okay,
married name.
and she stayed in Wisconsin?
Yeah, her husband was a farmer there.
And your mom and dad's name?
Well, Julia and Ernest Hudson,
Okay, so you got your dad's name.
yes.
Okay, the fact that you were the only boy, was it true that in some cases you could get a deferment if you were on the farm, if you were the only son?
I'm
Or
sure you could,
You
yes.
could have maybe.
Yeah.
Again, I wanted to finish that one comment, so, because you're on it, why did your dad like the athletic thing?
He was always interested in sports, and he played when he was a youngster. I have a picture of him from Spring Green, Wisconsin, where he was a catcher on his baseball team. And my dad was a very fast runner,
Okay,
and that's where maybe some of the genes came from, where Margie moves like she does, and
okay,
of course her son Jimmy, and all.
gotcha.
So that, we didn't even have a car when I started high school, see. That, you're right in the middle of the Depression then.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
what's so unusual about your dad's story.
one of your relatives was one of my rides back and forth, Carl Clark.
No kidding,
He worked in
Ford.
Hayward at the Ford garage.
yeah,
And I would ride back with him on Friday nights a number of times.
okay,
And my aunt was head of the welfare department. She was a nurse and head of the welfare department at the courthouse. So normally on Monday morning, I would ride to town with her.
okay,
Right. And then,
good, gives a good picture, little picture.
Okay, Hod, so just to touch on a couple things that we mentioned during the break, you said that there was one fellow that you remember that was really influential, and it was at the end of your training when you were in South Carolina.
okay.
Do you have a picture of him, or?
No, I don't.
Okay.
His name was Captain Barber, and he was a return lead pilot from combat. And so he kind of took me under his arm, and I learned things in the States from him that really helped me when I got into combat.
So that sort of helped you. That sort of
It helped me get into position of a group lead pilot
even before you
much
left.
earlier than most. Yeah.
Oh, did you already have that? Did you have to get that over in
combat.
In
Sure.
combat,
Sure.
but you
In
think
combat, I started out as a co-pilot for the first few missions, and then became a first pilot with my own crew, and then started flying element lead, and from element lead I went to squadron lead, and from squadron lead I went to group lead.
right? But you're saying that you were able to learn some things from him that were
Yes.
very valuable.
Yes.
And was that just about that B-25, or was it about flying in formation, or was it?
Combination of everything you did.
How to react to the
Yeah.
superiors, the personnel that might promote you, that kind of stuff.
So I had background in training in the States that from him that a lot of people wouldn't have had.
Uh-huh.
And you were flying with him? Was that where you were getting it from?
Yeah, he was my instructor then at Columbia, South Carolina.
In the B-25?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. So, I just wanted you to speak just to that, because we were off the tape, we weren't recording then. Hod, you took me through that, ferrying that airplane all the way from Florida
Yeah.
to Tunis.
Tunis.
And just, what was that experience like, just in general terms? I asked you explained all the legs of the flight and everything, but
Sure.
but just flying that airplane that distance, you said that was the longest cross country I guess you ever made.
Yeah.
And
Well, actually, you know, it was an experience, and it was an excitable experience for all of us in there. Now, my trip back was much better, even with the war ended, and being the first crew to fly that route back after the war ended of B-25s. We got the VIP treatment all the way from every base we went into, in addition to when we got back in the States. And it happened to be that my co-pilot coming home was the first pilot that had flown about the same amount of missions. His name was Hugh Galney, and he later on became a geologist and was in the oil business in Oklahoma. My navigator coming home, who had gone overseas as a bombardier, and then we lost our navigators in several missions, so he was made a navigator, and he then was with me flying home as bombardier navigator, whatever you want to call him, and he later then became a medical doctor. He graduated at Duluth. He interned at Duluth at St. Luke's Hospital, I think it was, in Duluth. And he married a nurse, and they became missionaries in New Guinea. He then later on in life, became a manic depressive from his experiences there. And so he was in a rest home in Coon Rapids in Minneapolis. And I visited him in the rest home a number of times. And he eventually passed away at the Veterans Hospital then in St. Cloud.
How old was he when he was admitted to that hospital, do you think?
I
Was he
would
in his
say,
50s?
oh no, when I would think, you mean when he was admitted into the,
Well, when he left New Guinea and
when he left New Guinea,
then he,
I
as
would,
you
I
say,
would
he got
think,
ill.
I would think 60, early 60s maybe.
Okay.
He was there for
So
a long time.
so he's pretty young when this depression took him.
Yeah. And I don't know the whole history of it, but his wife then divorced him, but still looked after him. So I assume that she had to divorce him for financial
Yeah.
reasons.
Probably.
And so anyhow, and then the radio man and the engineer gunner that flew with me, I don't know whatever happened to either one of them. And that flew with me, after on a trip home.
Okay.
but
I know where, a number of those ended up that flew with me in combat.
you kept relationships with a lot of the guys that were.
I did, yeah.
You were their leader. You were their lead
Yeah.
pilot, and was that through reunions or how was that?
With reunions, with some before reunions, and then more after reunions.
Okay, was some of it just picking up the phone, or was it Christmas cards too, or?
Christmas cards mostly in those days, yeah. We never, back in those days, people really didn't do much shooting of the bull on the radio, on the telephone anymore. The telephones were more for
Business.
emergencies or local things, and, yeah.
Party line.
And like a number of them have come to Grafton and flown with me. It was kind of interesting one day when Pappy Glassford was his name, and his wife and another person, I forget who was in the airplane, and Don was spraying. So I took them out in the 172, and then I flew on Don's wing while he was going across the field. They got quite a charge out of that. And then my engineer Gunner and his wife from from Michigan, then I had them flying. And his name is George Murcia, and he ended up as president of our bomb wing reunion group. So they're you know, you're looking at ex-colonels, one ex-general, ex-colonels, and here's a staff sergeant that ends up as president of the group. I thought that was, you know, quite an honorable thing to happen.
So then you belong to veterans organizations?
Yeah,
Okay. The VFW and the American Legion?
Legion, yeah.
Both? Well, you.
One more
Go ahead,
thing,
Mike.
don't forget you're gonna have him read a statement.
He is gonna read a statement. I'm gonna ask him a little bit, one question before that. I just wish that we could find that thing that you read to my class too. But, because you talked about this in a way. But here's a question, how did your service and experiences how did that affect your life, Hon?
well, it had a big effect on my life because as a result of my service, that was my career in aviation. So of course, that had an awful lot to do with it.
But being in war, did that affect your perspective on life?
Not at all, no. I handled that far better than I handled spraying. When I have bad dreams, you know, public relations and things like that, spraying is a lot tougher for me. I don't have any dreams related to combat at all. I've been very clear of that. But I do a lot of dreaming where I'm dealing with customers that are irate or something of that nature in the spray field.
Because I'm comparing it to my experience, do you have dreams about crop spraying, or that you're spraying?
Oh yeah, I sprayed a beat heck, you know. Even when I was spraying, I'd get a lot of fields done in the night, sleeping that I'd still have left to do the next morning.
So would you dream about that? Then are you saying that the military side you didn't have dreams?
I've never had any bad dreams about the military side, never.
What do you want to say there?
Oh, I think he's doing great, but I think you're gonna wear hot out here. I mean, there's a limit.
Well, I'm
to
in
what-
good shape,
So,
but
but
you
I
know,
think
with
it's
you guys, I don't wanna.
I think you've got to wrap it up for another day so he can start on a new subject, because these things are gonna come out.
Yeah. Okay, well, Todd, you're gonna read a statement for us now about your,
Yeah, well, I wanted to dedicate this interview to my combat companions. Together, we bombed the hell out of occupied Germany. We have experienced the tragedy of crews being shot down from our formation. We have endured the long, cold missions today, next week, next month. During all this, we have become like brothers. We shared the habits, the hang-ups, the hatred, the loves and lives of real people. Our dearest friends are our combat companions scattered across this great nation. Having the honor of being chosen to fly as lead pilot, I have lived the responsibility, excitement of bombing enemy targets vital to our access to a victory in World War II. That would kind of round that out.
Thanks, Si.
yeah, thank you, Hon.
By the way, was it cold up there? How was the heat? How was the cabin heat?
We had no cabin heat.
No cabin
No,
heat?
in
You should have had him
combat.
on.
In
Still got
combat.
him on?
Hmm?
No cabin heat.
No.
I know you had the sheep jackets and the,
Yeah,
but
Yeah.
it was, in other words, so it was a pretty uncomfortable
well,
ride.
that's right. on cold periods, and of course, obviously, when you get up 10, 12,000, it's a little bit colder than it is on the ground. And,
But you have any hot coffee in a thermos or anything?
no,
Nothing like that?
no. Our missions were short enough where, we again, compared to the heavy bombers that would go deeper into Germany and much higher experience, much colder weather, we had it real good compared to them. I was just at the funeral of our old mechanic at the airport at Grafton, Art Du Bois, who died about a month ago at Crookston. And Art was a tour, ball turret gunner on B-17s, and he lost his whole crew. He was only a survivor, and he went, I forget, yeah, he went to that school then later on in life when he was maybe 35 years old or something like that, and became an aircraft mechanic at Thief River, the school at Thief
Oh,
River.
yeah.
And so he worked for Hieronymus in Grand Forks for a number of years and around different places. And then he ended up in Grafton for the last 20 years of his life or something. And so he just passed away. But Art was a real good guy. But you can imagine losing your whole crew
yes.
soon after you get overseas.
Yeah.
And this was in a crash where he was the only survivor. And his son was killed when he was working in Grafton. His son was in the service in in California, and he was killed on a motorcycle. And he had a daughter. He had just a son and daughter, and his daughter is married to an airline pilot. And
So aviation still goes on in that
it
family?
does, yeah. But Art lived, you know where Angus is in?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, you know that country well.
Yeah.
Well, he lived east of Angus, that road, that Blacktop Road goes east,
Yeah.
and then it swings north for a little bit, and he was right on that turn.
Okay.
It's, maybe 8 miles east of Angus or
Got
so. And, but he still had a tandem type Taylor Craft.
Oh,
Little red one. It's still in the hangar out there. I suppose his son-in-law will have that now. But
That's
he
awesome.
kept that place, just like a park. His strip and his hangar and all that, was just, there
it's
was
just,
no blade of grass.
isn't
on
it
the
nice,
place.
Hod, to have those mechanics around, just
Yeah.
to have when you were flying, just there's
Oh,
something about just
all
the,
thick, yeah.
just like, it probably reminds you a little bit back there with your crew chief,
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got that same kind of.
Backup.
yeah. See, he used to fly over quite often then from his farm to Grafton.
Hmm.
And so numerous farmers east of the airport at Grafton would wave at him going by,
Oh, yeah.
probably 300 feet off the ground, something like that.
Yeah, great fun.
Thanks,
Well,
for, thanks for serving as a
Hey.
P-25 captain.
That's right, Hod, great time, so
Thank you, guys.
enjoyable. Good job.